there have been a lot of films made without cameras. It's known as handmade or direct on film, and there was a lot of modernist artists working in that way during the 20th century. The Agitations piece, I did it a couple of times before Whitstable, and it involved taking a piece of fogged negative and moistening both sides of it so that the light sensitive emulsion, which is on one side, and the black anti-halation backing, which is on the other side, so that when it's rubbed, both of those come off. The organiser, Cathy Rogers, suggested that I adapt the piece a little bit to the site of the Biennale of the seaside town. And as I need to moisten the film anyway, it seemed like that actually all the resources that I needed were there, that I could easily take the piece outdoors and do it all outdoors. I moistened the film in the sea, and then it made sense to actually leave it in there for a while by using one of the crab traps. So they're everywhere in Whitstable. So I actually just pushed a crab trap down into the foam of the edge of the sea and put the film in there, and then pulled a piece out, so that when actually I led them out of the auditorium down to the sea and treated this film as though it were a found thing that had just been washed up out of the ocean. That was sort of how I conceived it. So there were the 3 sets of marks. One was where I'm twisting the film and rubbing it against the jetty. The other was where I'm grinding the oyster shells so that they make contact with the underneath of the strip. So it's almost like the film strip joins our 2 forces, that of my foot, that of the oyster shells. The film strip is a sandwich that is in between. And the other mark that I made was scoring the film in lengths, using the span of my arms with the sharper parts of the oyster shells. Actually, I'd done 2 of these types of marks already in previous Agitations, with the jumping and the twisting, and I had done scoring before with my own fingernails, but I hadn't used the oyster shells to score, and neither had I used the oyster shells to make their own impressions on the underneath of the film. And that did actually produce marks that I hadn't seen before. So they did have their own voice, if you like, in a way. The substance of the oyster shells made marks on the film that I hadn't been able to produce before with my own body. In part, it's a reference to modernist poets and painters and artists. For example, Baudelaire spoke about the idea of the way that the artist makes quite sort of erratic, repeated marks, as though he might think that his art would escape him. So the idea of Agitations is that it sort of links into that, almost like action painting as well, like the types of things that Jackson Pollock did, which was really, in many ways, about an event as much as the materials that are used. I can't say what the audience experienced, because the film in its own right, I think it becomes more interesting with the knowledge of the types of actions that made the marks. Otherwise it's just purely abstract, and I think the marks are quite sort of pleasing, but knowing how they were made gives a different sort of layer to the film, I think, as a document almost, as a sort of a record of a set of actions. The film remains as a set of just pure little squiggles and lines and shapes and textures and rhythms, but it's also an index of a specific set of actions, a time, a place, the weather, the audience, all of those things.